Welcome, everyone, to a very special broadcast from Faith Community Church. I'm Pastor John Belangia. For those of you guys who are watching who may not know me, I'm the lead pastor at Faith Community Church, and it is truly an honor. This is something I've been wanting to do for quite some time, not just because of the current events, but because this man made such a mark on my life in the very short time we were able to spend together. But I am joined today by a man that I was able to meet about 15 years ago. I was blessed to be a part of the Christians United for Israel organization, and they took a group of pastors from the state of Georgia, wanting to expose them to the beauty of the culture of Israel, a greater understanding of the nation of Israel. And one of the best things that they did was bring our guests along our bus rides and take us a little deeper into the political and the military background of the nation of Israel. And he was one of those of you guys who know me, you know how much I love history and I love to learn. And I don't know that I ever had a better 72 hours than getting to ride the bus. In fact, I don't know if he recalls, but on the second day, I moved from my seat to the seat behind him because I was just completely wrapped up in every word he was saying, and I wanted to ask questions. But we welcome today from the nation of Israel, Mr. Elliot, and I'm going to try to do it the right way with the Jewish pronunciation, Kohoff.
Hot, hot duff, but close
Holtoff.
enough.
Holtoff. And for the English translation, it is Chodoff. But I did want to do my best to honor his culture and his heritage and his language. But we welcome you. I don't know if there's a specific title on the front end of the Elliot that you prefer. I feel like you're due a title. So if you'll tell me what that is, I want to
Well,
utilize it.
the title I generally use is that I'm an active duty reserve major in the IDF, and I'm a political and military analyst, and the rest is not all that
Okay.
important.
Okay, well, it is such an honor and a privilege to have you. And again, I want to thank you for the mark you made on my life. I don't know, and I wish the camera could look around my office and see the different items from the nation of Israel that I brought back with me from the trip. That you made such a mark on my life, and I don't know that I've ever really been able to articulate how big an impact you made and exposed me to such great understanding of what your people go through and what they have gone through. And it was truly eye-opening. And I just publicly want to tell in front of everyone, tell you thank you because I knew I supported the nation of Israel, but until you began to explain things that I had never heard articulated the way that you did, I didn't have. I would say that I was ignorant. I would say that I was just unaware. I will never forget standing on the backside of an apartment complex with you, if you recall, and bullet holes being on the backside of the apartment complex. And we were looking across
Yes.
I believe it was the nation of Jordan on the other side of that border where we were. I remember we went to Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan all on that trip to look across the border at the military.
Yes.
And I can remember you telling us to look at the bullet holes on a normal apartment complex and what your people
Right.
had to go through. And that was just one example. And I just publicly thank you. And I hope today that through you joining with us that we can make a few more people aware of what is going on right now, what you all have been through as a people, and help them learn to support and pray for your nation, your military, and your civilians. That's my hope today.
Thank you.
And so, just to get started,
Yes.
would just invite you to just introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background, your history, and your involvement in the military scene of the nation of Israel.
Well, as you can probably tell from both my name and my accent, I wasn't born in Israel. I'm a New Yorker originally. Uh, Grew up in Queens, went to college in Stony Brook on Long Island, graduate school at the University of Chicago, and I moved to Israel in 1983. So I've been here for quite a number of years.
Yeah.
Um, I'm a by training a military sociologist. The field itself pretty much doesn't exist anymore, and I shifted over to political science, international relations, strategy, which I taught at the University of Haifa for 25 years.
Wow.
And I live in the Galilee in a very small hilltop village, not far from the Lebanese border, not very close, but it's not that big a country, as you well know.
It's all close.
It's all close. And I've been an officer in the IDF since 1985. I still serve. Of course, at my age, I don't run around with kids anymore. I'm more involved in planning and doctrine and that sort of thing, but still very much involved. Right after October 7th, I spent a month in the Gaza division. They called me up, and I was down there. So I'm pretty current. My last reserve duty was last week, and more coming up. So the grand sense of that's my background. I'm married for the second time. I have 4 adult children and grandchildren from a first marriage and a 5-year-old from this one.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Nothing like starting over, right?
That's it.
With the military and with parenting. I don't know which would be harder.
Well, a friend of mine said, when you have a child, I'm almost 70. So he said, he'll put you back into your 20s. I said, yeah, basic training, no sleep. Right. Your time isn't yours anymore and that sort of thing. That's but it's great.
Well, now, one of the things that I know a lot of the people that are watching may or may not know, because I do know where we are, there are a lot of people that don't have a lot of background understanding of Israel, the military. Everyone in the nation of Israel does serve their military. Could you just kind of explain how that works?
Okay, not everyone serves, but everybody is obligated. We have a universal conscription system, or what I call an unselective service. In other words, the default is that you serve. There are all sorts of exemptions, and I mean that would be a whole talk in and of itself. But basically, everybody at age 16 has to register, and unless they're exempt, they are eligible for induction at age 18. Most people are inducted, men and women. They serve obligatory service between 2 and 3 years, and if they become officers, they serve longer. It's an additional obligation. We don't have academies. All of our officers are up through the ranks.
Okay.
And then when they're out, after they finish the obligatory service, some stay in as professionals. It's a very, very small professional army. And the rest of us go into the reserves and are called as needed. And since October 7th, the as needed has been extremely heavy. There are young reservists who've done 400 or 500 straight days of reserve duty between Gaza and Lebanon. And it's ongoing. As a matter of fact, in the moments before we came online, rockets were fired out of Gaza, and a missile was fired from Yemen by the Houthis into the Tel Aviv area. They were intercepted, but hundreds of thousands of people were in shelters 10 minutes before you and I came online now.
Wow. Amazing. Well, I know we are limited on time, and we want to be respectful of your time as well with your family, as it is evening there. I just want to ask you a few questions that you could share with our people. Again, I think you have a really great audience that will be able to learn today and are unaware of a lot of these things. First thing I want to ask you is, as you know, and this is on all sides, this is not me trying to be political for anybody watching. The American media loves to spin stories. We all know that. It doesn't matter what side you're on. They love to spin the stories to fit their narrative. Could you give us an update from your point of view, being on the front lines and in the nation, of what's going on, of what is actually happening? I know you just gave us a very relevant update just now of 10 minutes ago.
Well, first of all, let me say that the American media in general, and I'm extremely critical of the media.
Yes, as am
in
I.
large part. Okay, and I call it the CNN phenomenon, where CNN stands for certainly not news, and I don't mean the station. I mean the whole across the boards fast food news. One of their issues, but before we get into malice, let's start with malpractice. One of the issues is they want to they want the scoop. It's more important to be the first to get the story out, and less important for it to be accurate.
Yes.
So given that, if we go to the case of Gaza over the past almost 2 years now, all the information coming directly out of Gaza is coming from Hamas. No surprise, they lie through their teeth. They do it automatically. I mean, our joke is, you know that a Hamas spokesperson is lying because their lips are moving.
Yeah.
And the media now, with the bias of being anywhere from critical to anti-Israel,
Right,
picks up on it and violates their own standards. And I'll give you just actually two classic examples of the same type. A rocket falls and hits a hospital in Gaza, and the Hamas spokespeople immediately, like in 2 minutes, come out and say, an Israeli bomb hit the hospital, there are 400 dead, and it was done intentionally. And immediately, the CNN phenomenon, I want to just reiterate, I'm not talking about CNN, the station.
right.
All of them, CNN, Fox, Sky,
Yes,
BBC,
yes.
the whole gang, are now spinning this story out where, first of all, anybody who's ever been in a mass event of any type knows that you don't have precise numbers, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of the event. And if somebody comes along and 5 minutes afterwards says, this is exactly how many there were, 472 people, 387 women and children, it's like, wait a minute. Just normal analytical knowledge. And again, the news people are not stupid. They may not be particularly professional, but they know very well that it's not true. But immediately that story goes out. And of course, 2-3 days later, it turns out that the rocket was fired by Hamas, and it didn't really hit the hospital. It landed in the parking area, and it wasn't 400 dead. It was 3, and etc.
Yeah, okay? I remember that story well. Yes.
Okay, so that's happened a few times.
Yes.
The penchant, and again, this is part of the sensationalism beyond being anti-Israel, of saying Israel struck a hospital or struck a school. Yes, the building may have been a school once upon a time. Now it's a Hamas headquarters. It's no longer a school.
Right.
According to the Geneva Convention, if a hospital has been taken over by military force and used for military purposes, it no longer is considered a hospital by international legal standards. Now, that doesn't mean we have no obligations, but it does mean that it's no longer hospital. And especially when we're talking about places where hostages were taken and in some cases murdered in them. And these are the backstories that don't come out in the media.
Right.
So now the result, and this is once again, this didn't start in the last year or two. This is incitement, and the man who turned incitement into a policy, into a philosophy, was the Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, who said very clearly, incitement isn't meant to educate, it's meant to cause hatred.
Wow.
And
it's working.
And propaganda is meant to incite.
Right.
And it's working. You note, and if you see the headlines, it will start with the statement and end with the stater. In other words, Israel kills 300 children, says Hamas.
Right. Yes.
Okay. By the time you get to the says Hamas, you've already had it, embedded in your mind, all these tragedies. And here I want to make clear, it's a war. It's tragic.
Yes.
People are getting killed.
Yeah.
People are getting
Absolutely.
killed.
Collateral damage is a real thing in any war.
Yes. Exactly. Collateral and accidental.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
In other words, there are cases where we go after targets as legitimate targets, and civilians are, as a consequence, are
Yes.
killed or injured. And there are cases in war, and anybody who knows anything about the military knows this. Not every round fired, not every shell fired goes to the target that it was meant to go to.
That's right. Yeah.
Um, and I've said this numerous times in talk. For some reason or other, when people are shooting at you, your accuracy drops.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very logical.
Uh,
Yeah.
and it's tragic, and I want to emphasize that it's
Yes.
tragic.
Absolutely.
But in large part, the reason it's happening, well, grandly, it's happening because of what Hamas has done. And in large part, it continues to happen because of what Hamas continues to do, including using its own people,
Yes.
not only as human shields, but as human sacrifices.
Yes.
There have been cases where Hamas has murdered its own people and blamed us for it.
Right. Right.
And the press very happily picks up on that because they're telling a story. Yeah. And the story is, the underdog of Hamas, and Israel, the great power that's the size of New Jersey.
Right. Right. Wow. Yeah, it is heartbreaking to see those things, just like you say, take root in people and then buy in to uh, just and I'm sure that you have seen it over there and your people. I'm sure but when you have on the major universities of the United States, when you have marches that are happening to demonstrate pro Hamas. I mean, that's
Yes.
something that I didn't know that I would ever see in my lifetime, for it to be so public and accepted
Yes.
in those areas. So very, very heartbreaking. Many people do not know the true mindset, teaching, character of Hamas, as well as Iran and the other nations that are around you. So many people don't understand their mindset, the way they've been raised, the way that they believe, their hatred for not only you, but for the United States of America, the great Satan.
Yes.
Their desire to see genocide, their desire to not just see your people destroyed, but our people destroyed through violence and honestly having a thirst for violence, death. Could you share a little bit about the mindset of those nations so that our people, because they can't comprehend the hatred that you do.
Correct.
I mean, it's not because they're intentionally trying to ignore it.
No.
We can't understand every neighbor around us having such a hatred.
Right, John. Let me tell you that you're introducing me into a lecture that I've given numerous times in universities and in other places. We cannot comprehend. In other words, it's not a failing on our part.
Right.
We just can't. The best we can do is understand and appreciate that we don't comprehend. Right. So, okay,
that makes sense.
Virtually all of the enemies that we have around us, and I say virtually because there are exceptions, and I never speak in absolute 100% terms. There's always an exception. But virtually all of them draw their ideologies from the same source, and that is the Muslim Brotherhood of Egypt. Okay, the organization that was started in the 1920s. Once again, it's a lecture in and of itself, so I'll just hit some of the really critical points. During the 1930s, the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood became Nazis. Now, I know today in America, it's very common to use the word Nazi, sort of bandied about anybody.
It's a word that has become, we have completely
right.
become desensitized to the true
right.
meaning of the word.
So here, Nazis, they bought into the Hitler ideology. As a matter of fact, back here on my shelf somewhere, I have one of the great research books on it that came out about 20 years ago, called A Genealogy of Evil, From Nazi Ideology to Islamic Jihad. They literally bought into Hitler, and they fused Nazi ideology with radical Islamic belief. Once again, a whole story in and of itself, but understand that we're talking about a toxic fusion of radical Islam and Nazism. The ideologue of the Brotherhood was a man named Sayyid Qutb. And just to give you an idea, he wrote a piece in the early 1960s before Nasser hanged him, called Our Struggle with the Jews. Now, the key here, of course, is if you understand, my struggle in German is Mein Kampf. He chose his words very carefully. And the Jews, not the Zionists, not the Israelis, the Jews. The followers of Qutb include Ayatollah Khomeini. They include Al-Qaeda. They include ISIS. Hamas is the Muslim Brotherhood. You have branches of it in the United States, like the Students for Justice in Palestine and others. These are all branches of the ideology of Muslim Brotherhood, and I'm not doing it full justice because there are many, many others. The Islamists in Africa who are murdering Christians wholesale.
Wow.
Okay. All draw their ideology from the same place. And the Brotherhood's ideology is based on a simple motto of 5 points. Allah is our objective. The Quran is our constitution. The Prophet, meaning Muhammad, is our leader. Jihad, meaning holy war, is our way. And the last one, which nobody comprehends, and this comes back to where we started on this, death for the sake of Allah is our highest aspiration. Now, you and I and the people listening do not understand death as an aspiration.
No, we do not.
Because we come from a belief system coming from Torah, what you would call Old Testament, I'll call Hebrew Scripture for our purposes, and you shall choose life.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay? And these people say we choose death. Don't try to understand it because you can't.
Right.
Simply appreciate that you can't understand. In other words, take it at face value and move on with it. We don't get that. Now, of course, here we do because we're living amongst. But they say it with pride. We saw it in the funerals of the leaders, the Iranian military leadership that we just took out in this recent round in June. These are all martyrs. We aspire to be like them. I don't know. I don't aspire to be like a martyr. Right. I aspire perhaps to holiness and righteousness, but martyrdom, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay. If I have to, fair enough.
Right.
Okay.
I want to avoid it at all costs.
Exactly. I'll take my time if you don't mind. Okay. And that we simply don't understand.
Yeah.
We don't get hatred on the level of what we saw on October 7th, 2023. Okay. Horrors that, quite frankly, very close friend, colleague of mine who actually wrote that book that I mentioned earlier, Genealogy of Evil, David Patterson, was a Holocaust scholar at UT Dallas. We've discussed it. And in many ways, there were things about October 7th that were worse than the Nazis. In other words, the savagery on the visceral level went in some ways beyond.
Yeah.
And I say in some ways, it's hard to compare evil with evil. It's right. And it's something that it's hard to appreciate. And here I can tell you, as somebody who grew up in the United States, and I'm a dual citizen, I'm an American as well as an Israeli, and I think I understand both countries and cultures reasonably well. It's very difficult to get your head around the idea that there are people whose entire existence revolves around your extermination.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Wow.
And, when the mobs in Iran screamed death to America and death to Israel, and Khomeini referred to America as the great Satan and Israel as the little Satan, keep in mind, he wasn't speaking in geographical terms. He was speaking in theological terms. He was a theologian. The great Satan of America is the great evil in the world. And he writes about it. I have his book back here. America is the great source of evil in the world. And Israel it's Jewish, so it's evil in its own right. And this is his perspective and continues to this day. I'll come back to that in a second. And they need to be eradicated for the good and the holiness of the world. Now, let me just finish this one point because I think it's very important. These are things you don't get from your media. The leader of Iran today, the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, Ayatollah Khamenei, was appointed by Khomeini as his replacement. Now, I want to break that down for a second because once again, this is not our political frame. Khomeini came to power in 1979. From 1979 until 2025, there have only been two leaders in Iran.
Yes.
Khomeini and his heir Khamenei. Now, think for a moment, Jimmy Carter was president when Khomeini came to power. Think how far America is in terms of generations of presidents.
Wow.
From Jimmy Carter to
Never
today.
Never thought about it
right?
like that. Wow.
Right? Okay. In other words, whatever impact he had, and some of it still reverberates, like the fact that Iran is the Islamic Republic, and he certainly had a part in that, intentional or otherwise. But how far America is from Jimmy Carter and how close Iran is to Ayatollah Khomeini.
Wow.
Okay.
It's amazing.
So when I cite Khomeini, it's not some, right, Thomas Jefferson.
You're one leader
not
away.
To make any comparison. Yeah. That's right. And he appointed him as his heir. In other words, it's not like he died and he was appointed by some committee.
Wow.
Khomeini said, he's my successor.
Wow.
So we are still in Khomeini's Iran.
Wow. I can already tell this 40-minute interview is not going to suffice for the people that are watching. They're going to want to follow up to some of this.
We'll
because
have
I
to
do know
it again.
You're grazing the surface on a lot of this.
Yeah.
Yes. As we again limited to the 40 minutes. How is the morale in Israel at the moment? What can I represent the American church, obviously being a local pastor.
Right.
What do the people need to know and how they can be praying and trying to support resourcing the nation of Israel and everything they're going through right now?
Morale is good. We went through, obviously, a horrendous, savage catastrophe on October 7th, 2023. But the country bounced back almost, I would say, miraculously.
Wow.
In other words, the mobilization, voluntary and otherwise, happened almost instantaneously. Individually, there were people who on October 7th simply got in their cars and drove down there and said, we got to get down there and help save people.
Wow.
Where we mobilized hundreds of thousands of reservists, some of whom are on and off still serving on a regular basis. I'm talking about our younger combat units that are in combat still in Gaza. We just went through a 12-day campaign with all due respect to President Trump, it wasn't a 12-day war. It was a 12-day campaign.
Yeah.
In which, because of the ballistic missiles, we didn't sleep well. And fatigue, General Patton famously said, fatigue makes cowards of us all.
Wow. Yeah.
And our family was in our home bomb shelter virtually every night as missiles flew overhead. And we heard them. We heard the interceptions. We heard the impact. And here, frankly, I've been an officer for 40 years. Hearing something blow up in the distance doesn't have that much of an effect on me. My wife doesn't have the same background.
Yeah.
And what do you tell a 5-year-old when he hears booms?
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Okay. So given all of that, morale is still very high. There's a determination. I think part of that, I can say, is an appreciation of Jewish history. And I say this in no way being flip or sarcastic, but as a student of Jewish history, they're trying to kill us. So what else is new? And we're now in a different place than we were 80 years ago, 90 years ago.
Yes.
Where, we have a response. We have an ability to respond. And that also has a great effect overall on the morale of the country.
Yeah.
So that there's a determination, despite all of the Al Jazeera stories that Israelis were fleeing and the last ones were, scrambling to get on planes and boats. Simply not true.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, when the campaign began with Iran, and our airspace was closed in large part because we knew, and with missiles coming in, our interceptors would be firing, and we didn't want civilian aircraft in the air for an Arrow interceptor to accidentally, misidentify. Thousands upon thousands of Israelis were stranded abroad simply because their flights were canceled. And in some cases, and I know a couple of people who were actually in the air on the way to Israel, and their flights were turned around and landed in Cyprus and Greece. And these people spent the better part of 12 days desperately trying to get into Israel.
Wow.
Well, there's the inverse. I mean, people flew into Cyprus and chartered sailboats.
Wow.
To get to Israel.
Wow.
So, talk about morale. That's a lot of that. What to pray for? Look, obviously praying for peace is always a good thing. And I would say that peace in and of itself, if we look at it in sort of grand terms, is wonderful. If we look at it in terms of the dirty reality of politics, I would say much more for Israel's success, victory, fortitude, and
I just want you to know I am teaching as many people as I talk to that's exactly, we stand behind you.
And it's appreciated.
Yeah.
When mobs, and you whether it's on American campuses or in music festivals around the world, they're screaming in one way or another, death to Israel and death to the Jews. It's important to know that there are a lot of people out there who oppose that. Yes. And oppose it, vehemently, because frankly, people like yourself don't make it onto the nightly news.
Right. Wow. Well, I can't thank you enough for doing a moment, and I will go ahead and publicly ask you, can we do this again?
And I will publicly say yes
in the future, because I can tell you there were subjects that I didn't even have the opportunity to allow you to expound upon, such as one of the things that you brought up, and that is Israel's desire to have as few casualties as possible and trying to go above and beyond what any normal army would ever do to make sure that there are no casualties, including warning the enemy themselves.
Yes.
So that no one is hurt, as well as the miraculous stories you shared with us about how God has been so faithful to you and your people. And there are miracles they will not read in history books, as you said it to us.
Correct.
And those were mind blowing to me. So I want them to hear those stories. I do thank you for giving them a taste of the realities of what you're going through, because as you said earlier, they can't comprehend every neighbor around you wanting death to you. And like you said, yes. I mean, for people that don't know, your nation is the size of New Jersey.
Yes.
And it's you can't say that this is a political war or anything. The nation of Israel, there is no reasonable reason for people to have such hatred and desire for a piece of land that is of such little value in the world standard. And I don't mean it's not valuable. Right. The Lord bless your people with it.
Right.
It's very valuable, but there are there's not oil there. There are there's no major, anything that would cause a nation to say, we need that land, unless
limestone rock.
Yeah.
Limestone rock.
Limestone rock. That's what you have. And so it is amazing. So I tell you, thank you. And I do hate for the short nature of this time, but we will do this.
I'll be happy to come back.
And I do want everyone to know I have extended another invitation to him, that he does travel the states to do talks. If you would like to know his itinerary, I will let him send me where he will be, but we are going to do our best to get on the itinerary no matter what we have to do, because this man has made an incredible mark on my life with his wisdom and knowledge on this subject matter. And we are praying for you and we stand with you. And if there are needs that you know that we can help meet, please let us know so that we can get that information out.
Certainly will.
We were closing down, but as we close, Mr. Elliott, since we do have a few extra minutes now, if you just want to close with any statement you would like to make, and if you would like to tell people what Israel does, because I do know the media spins the casualty thing greatly, and I don't think the average person understands how much you do as a military, as a nation, to try to minimalize that. I would love for you to share that part of what you guys do as we close.
Sure. First of all, just the fact that we, as much as we can, announce in advance where major operations are going to be. And here I want to make a distinction. There are operations that you can't announce in advance. If we're going to take out a Hamas leader, we obviously can't.
Right. Yeah, that's a little different. Yeah.
Right. But if there's going to be a major move, whether it's against a static target, for example, bombarding a weapons factory or warehouse or something like that, that isn't going to be moved in a number of hours either way, we certainly do everything we can to tell people in that area move out. We did it in Iran as well, in Tehran. In Gaza, it's that much more difficult because Hamas is doing everything it possibly can to prevent people from
they want to create
out of the
casualties because they know that they can use that as propaganda against
they do, exactly.
Yeah.
So, all of the casualties figures in Gaza come from Hamas. And there's no external verification of any type. What they call the Gaza Health Ministry is a Hamas organization. They make no distinction between combatants and non-combatants. And this is before we get into the fact that they lie outright.
Right.
As best we can tell, the combatant to non-combatant death ratio has been about 1-to-1. In other words, one non-combatant for every combatant. Given that the United Nations, and you can look this up, has stated in 21st century warfare, non-combatant to combatant ratios tend to be around 10-to-1.
Wow.
In other words, 10 non-combatants for every combatant.
Yeah.
1-to-1. You don't need to have a PhD in statistics to see that this is very, very far from that.
Yeah. A 10%. I mean, you have a 90% success rate.
Right. Now there are other elements built into this as well, and this goes into propaganda and the world accepting it. According to international definition, anybody under 18 is a child.
Yeah.
Okay. A 17-year-old carrying an AK-47 assault rifle is a child.
Is not the same thing as a 4-year-old walking down the street.
Precisely.
Yes.
Precisely.
Wow.
So there too, we do everything as best we can. I have a moment. In 2003, I was in Gaza. This is back before we withdrew from Gaza, in Gaza proper. And Hamas, same Hamas, was sending children at night to rattle the security fence so that their intelligence guys could track our response to where points were being triggered, how quickly the response was, where they came from, and the like. Now, anybody's familiar with night vision, whether it's from military or hunting or whatever, the night vision scopes do not give you very high resolution.
Right.
And there were a number of cases where children were shot because touching the security fence in and of itself is assumed to be an attack on Israel. And there weren't many cases, but there were cases. And the order came down, and I was there, I heard it, that since you can't tell the difference between a 14-year-old and an adult in night vision, but you can tell if they're carrying an assault rifle. If they're not armed, you don't fire.
Wow.
And for a few weeks, none of them were fired upon. Hamas understood what happened, and they started giving these 14-year-old kids assault rifles so that we would shoot them.
Wow. Unbelievable.
And here again, you can do everything you possibly can, and still there's a limit.
And there's still going to be some civilian casualties.
Right.
That's
they're going to be.
War.
The claim that what Israel is doing is a genocide flies in the face of a reality that the population of Gaza, even with the war, has gone up since October 7th, 2023. This may be the only genocide in history where the population increases as a result of the genocide.
Wow. Unbelievable.
Okay. And that in and of itself, I think, is an indicator of how careful Israel is being. Because with the massive amount of fighting, we've killed something on the order of 25,000 terrorists in Gaza. That alone should give a sense of the intensity of the fighting that's been happening there, above and below ground, in an urban environment that they have prepared for war for 20 years. The numbers just don't support indiscriminate Israeli attacks.
Right.
And all right, and I will be the last person to defend Israeli perfection. We're not perfect.
Absolutely.
We make mistakes.
I've tried to voice that as well with our people, as they know how passionate I am to stand with Israel. I say no government is perfect. No military force is perfect. There are going to be mistakes. There are going to be intelligence mistakes. There are going to be, as you said, you get a lot less accurate when you're under fire. So I totally know what you're saying.
All of that. And you know what? I'll go a step further. Not every soldier in the IDF is a righteous person. That's why we have military courts.
Yes. Just like in America.
And I was just going to say,
hear the stories of the Vietnam War.
That's right.
Yeah. You hear those stories.
That's right. And you know, in war, things happen, and there's a lot of borderline, and there are bad people in every society.
Yes.
But that's why as I said, why there are military courts and courts martial, and investigations and things like that. So once again, not perfect, far from it, because we're all far from perfect.
Yes.
And under stress and fatigue and fear and adrenaline and lack of information, the likelihood of error goes up significantly. Mm-hmm. Nonetheless, the accusations of indiscriminate attacks on civilians, if nothing else, are just not borne out by the numbers.
Right. Well, that line that you had a moment ago, it'll be the only genocide in history where there was an increase of population. That is a powerful statement in and of itself.
Yeah. So we do what we can. We, as I said, with errors, but the intent, and I know this from the inside, and I've been in the briefings, the intent is to inflict as few non-combatant casualties as we possibly can. When we went into hospitals that were headquarters and bastions of Hamas, we went in with doctors. We went in with medical equipment.
Wow. Yeah. Now, there was a report that was actually kind of interesting. During one of the operations in a hospital, we were in the hospital for about 2 weeks. One of the major hospitals, I think it was Shifa, but
there have been so many. It may not have been that one. And when it was over, the Hamas health ministry said that while the Israelis were in the hospital, 30 people died. And here I have to cite my mother-in-law, who's a senior nurse and author of nursing textbooks, was here, and she said, 20 people died in a hospital in 2 weeks. That's a low number.
Right.
People die in hospitals all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wow.
But it came out, the implication was they died because of
Israel.
The Israelis being there.
Yeah.
Right. And my guess is that fewer people died in those 2 weeks than died normally in those hospitals, because our doctors were in there with our equipment.
Wow. Amazing.
So these are things that we do. And as I said, it doesn't always work, and it doesn't always work as planned. But if there were malice on a grand scale, the numbers would just be very, very different.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. I definitely that was one of the questions we didn't get to earlier. I wanted to make sure, because when we were there and you were showing us the examples of dropping pamphlets, so many different things that you guys were doing, knowing that the very targets you were targeting were also getting the warnings. So
yes,
it was hindering your ability to be effective as a military at the motive and at the heart of saying we want to create as few casualties as possible. And I thought, man, people need to hear that. And as you just said, you're in these briefings, you're in these meeting rooms, and to hear you say it is a lot more effective than for me on the other side of the ocean to try to say it on your behalf. So thank you for sharing that. And
pleasure.
Again, thank you for being with us today. And I can tell you, in the greater Augusta area, I have not seen anyone do anything like what you're doing with me today. And I can assure you, we are going to have an incredibly high response of, okay, when can we hear from this guy again? And I know our ministry in particular, we cordially invite you to come to do a teaching and a lecture. Would be amazing.
You are at the top of my itinerary list for my next trip. You'll be the first to know.
Wow.
And yes, and schedule permitting, and I'm reasonably flexible, not incredibly flexible. I'll be happy to do this again whenever you like.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. We're praying for you, your family, your nation. And if there are things that we can do, I will be happy to be your voice box in the greater Augusta, Georgia area, to be able to express to people needs that you know of. I don't know if you saw where I had said something. We do work with an organization in Jerusalem called Zion's Bridge with a pastor named Robbie Coleman, and he let us know of a need of some military radios to go into the rubble. And so they were short 12 radios for the IDF there, and our church was able to go and make that purchase this week to supply those radios. So anything like that.
Excellent. I will certainly let you know.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We hope you have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
God bless you, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you. God bless you.